Good afternoon, and welcome to Gator's Garage, the home of all things historical gaming in and around the great city of Savannah, Georgia. We have with us today our special guest, John Ross, who's the tournament organizer for Warzone Atlanta Bolt Action, and they just had their tournament up there in Atlanta this last weekend. So we're here to kind of do a debrief with John. What went well, what can maybe be done better next time, but mostly how much fun everybody had. So, John, welcome to the show.
Well, it's always great to be here, and I appreciate your giving Warzone some attention, Michael. It's always great. Yeah, we had a record-setting weekend. It was the largest Warzone ever. It's our 11th year, and Warzone is more than just bolt action. It's 40K. It's Age of Sigmar. This year we had Blood Bowl and Kings of War and Mech Warrior and a bunch of other things going on as well. So that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger every year as more people kind of join in. But it was at a cool new venue at a new hotel, and we were really pleased with the turnout. And my bolt action event, I believe, set a new record for the United States of being the largest bolt action event in the U.S., both on Friday for my Friday event and the Saturday Sunday one. So how cool is that?
Good on us. Very good. Again, snaps to you, snaps to all the people that came out, because as you and I both know, events are no fun if we don't get people. And man, folks just really stepped up to support the event, both players and organ and us. I know you had a lot of donations and not donate, I guess donations and prize support from just right across the board. It's one of the things I've always loved about our hobby is everybody, both customers, players, and vendors. We tend to share with a pretty open hand, and that makes it more fun for everybody. Hey, before we get too deep in, be sure you do all the YouTube things. Click that like button. If you're not subscribed, well, you ought to be, because it's just like one of the best channels on the internet. Although at least we're working on getting it there. I mean, where else are you going to see John Ross, right? So there you go. But
That's pretty
also,
exciting, man.
best way to support the channel is to buy some merch from Gator Games, or support us on Patreon or Ko-Fi. All right, that's the end of our commercial for the moment. But again, John, I heard great things. I saw great pictures, grabbed a few of them and shared them out to some of the groups,
Yes, you did.
and just looking to get your perspective. So take it away, sir.
Well, I've got some slides here, and I'll share them with you in a second. But I'll say this. So first off, I don't think using a goofy redhead as an advertising draw vehicle for your website is a good idea. So I think I wouldn't advise that as a tactic. Hey, so it's the largest bolt action event that I know of. So we had 39 sold tickets for the Saturday event, and we had over 24, I think 25, 26. I had 26 for the Friday event. It just blew me away. So that is 270 games of bolt action taking place over a 3-day period. And that's a lot of bolt action. Now, compared to Europe, they have big events that are bigger there. But when I looked at the numbers for LVO and Adepticon last year, and of course, I've been to both of them, we were bigger than both of those. And I don't know what Adepticon will be this year. I hope they're even bigger than us. But if they're not, that makes Warzone the largest. But I think, the whole point of it is you do these events so that you can bring out new players. When I looked at the field, I had about a third of the players that I would consider newbies, and I had a couple of them had never played a competitive tournament game in their life, and they came out with their bolt action armies, or they borrowed one from a buddy and they played, and they all seemed to have a great time. A tournament's a great place to meet new people. It's a great place to learn a lot about how you play.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Even if you lose 3 games, you still learn so much about how you did. And so I was really pleased to have so many new people showing up, so many new faces, and some of the regulars too. And to me, that's the big success. The numbers are great, but seeing a lot of new people come into the hobby is the real victory.
Absolutely. It was the same thing for me at I was over, of course, at Skirmish Con there in Jacksonville, and for us it was the same thing. There were a lot of new people that had come in. I know some dads and grandfathers brought their sons and granddaughters, and that's, to your point, that's what we love to see, because that's where we're seeing growth in the hobby, and that's the future of the hobby. So that's excellent. And I tell people, when we're talking about your tournaments, I'm like, John Ross runs a very new player friendly tournament, and you should go. To your point, John, if nothing else, to get some different playtime in and see kind of how other people do it.
Michael, this year I matched the really true newbies. I matched them in the first round with a more experienced
Excellent.
player, as opposed to two newbies trying to figure it out and looking in the rule books. I matched them with an experienced player, but players that I knew were excellent teachers.
Excellent.
And I said, hey, do you mind doing this? And they were like, no, I'd be glad to do it. And an experienced player, someone coming to win, if you get matched with a newbie, you might get a loss because the game goes slow and you don't get through all 5
Right.
turns. And so that's
Yep.
actually kind of a risk for the super experienced. I think it's a real testament to a lot of the players that came. They were like, of course I'll help them. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take care of them. And I had a brand new player who had never played a war game before by himself ever. And he was playing with a loner army, and he went 2-1.
Oh, wow.
How cool is that, right?
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Now, that sounds like someone who more had to learn the bolt action mechanics than learn the mechanics of tactics. You can kind of tell the difference. Some folks, you got to teach them the mechanics, and then sometimes some folks you've got to teach them tactics as well. But this guy, he was a very quick study. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, he's just a very smart guy. I would say that. But I'm glad to see that we had our youngest player was 18 and our oldest was in their 70s, and sort of everything in between, college students and guys still in the military and older guys all playing together. And we had Joey Stedman and his wife came, so we had a girl playing 40K and bolt action. We had a bunch playing 40K, so it's I was really pleased with the diversity of experience levels and diversity of armies too. We'll get into that. I show some slides. You want me to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, go ahead and fire them up. Let's see what you got. I did notice at the last event we did, there wasn't a German army in sight. I think the Axis was represented by Japan and Italy. There wasn't nobody brought a German army other than me as a backup. And I'm like, wow, that's really something. I like to run my German armies because they're just so flexible, and especially they're flexible for the models that I have in my collection. Let me put it that way. So.
Yeah. Well, I've been enjoying playing my German armies. They've been on the shelf for a while, so it's fun. We had a lot of German armies, but at the end of the event, when we were on the top tables going into the final round, I had one German, had one Soviet, had one Japanese, one Polish, one American, one Brit.
That is fantastic.
Cool. Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Yes.
So
and that speaks to, I think, some of the inherent balance in bolt action. You said a Polish army. I know I observed early on from just watching play that because players tend to have to go with like lighter armor and smaller armor, the mid and late war, especially German armor or even Soviet armor, the big tanks are expensive. So the smaller tanks are going to be relatively vulnerable to early and mid war armor. So it's kind of self-leveling in that regard. And their infantry rules are written pretty balanced, all things considered.
Well, that's we didn't. You'll see. I've got a breakout here of the tanks and something for you. I'll skip through this really quickly. But
okay.
The first thing I want to show off is the venue. So we were in a brand new hotel for us. We had outgrown the DoubleTree before, so we were at a much bigger hotel. But in that upper left-hand corner, look at how far the tables are spaced apart.
This is kind of talk about lots of room.
Yeah, and you'll notice in the bottom, every table's got 4 chairs, so you got a place to put your army as well as a place to sit down. To us, it's really important that you don't bump butts. You're not squeezed in, and so space in concert in these big halls is expensive, but we think the extra expense is worth it because we want you to come and focus on your game, not the fact that you're slamming into some guy behind you, or when it comes time for everybody to move and you do that shuffle where you're shuffling around with your expensive toys on something, and you're trying to squeeze through. We want to make it super easy for everyone. There's Monica over at the right with her Japanese bonsai headgear on, but we want to make it a really fun. There's another picture of the venue with people all in it and playing, and there's 200 people in that hall, but everyone's got space to move and play, and we think that's really important.
Absolutely. I like it. That's very good.
On the outside of this hall, there was all kinds of space. Michael, there was vendor space there that next year hopefully we'll get you and some more vendors in there. We had a couple of vendors that came. Military Buildings Authority set up a huge booth, and we had a couple of others as well. But we're not exactly a convention, although we're sort of becoming that,
right?
Because it's tournaments, and when people are in tournaments, their heads down and they're playing. They're not shopping. But we
Right.
hope to do on more demo games, more paint and takes, more of the things that you see at conventions in the future, in order to make it more attractive to vendors to come. So hopefully we'll get you there.
Yeah, that was one of the observations Randy made is just how quickly you got to transition between rounds. Whereas at a and of course I was at a classic convention this weekend where someone may play a game in the morning and then take and actually tip of the hat to SkirmishCon. They do an hour between each of their sessions, so you've got that hour to shop. But I know from experience when you're running these tournaments, you got to keep the clock moving, and it just makes it really tough for people to shop during. Usually, if they're going to shop, they're going to shop either before or after.
Well, and for the big game, I do 3-hour rounds, so that's a lot of time to play. And I like having longer rounds. So it was 2 hours for 750 points, and 3
Makes
hours
sense.
for 1250, so that you can get your games done and you can focus. We're actually going to talk about that here in just a second. Here's some examples of tables. I don't know if you want me to play these videos or not, but the tables are all thematic, and the idea behind the table is, however much effort you put into your beautiful army, right? We judge you on your army. You should judge us on our tables.
That's right.
Right. So every one of
I know when.
Go ahead.
Oh man, those look great. I know when Randy and I put together our tables for our tournament, we've got one coming up in March. We take a lot of pains in making sure these tables look good. That they're tables that we would want to play on and that are worth people traveling to. That looks like some of Randy's stuff there. Did he help you out?
No, he did not. No, he did not.
Okay.
I want people to come and play. I don't want you to have to, haul a bunch of equipment and gear. Just come and focus if you can. I've got one loaner table from the guy who helps me as an assistant TO, but other than that, everything's set up and ready to go when you show up. And there's lots of little details. And then there's a card on each table that tells you how to play the terrain. So that market there, for example, or that crashed airplane on the other one. Bolt Action's got rules for basic terrain, but it doesn't have rules for things like even wheat fields. How do you play a wheat field, or how do you play a hill? And so we try to put that all out there so that you can focus on playing the game, not getting confused about terrain. And you can see these tables are all thematic. So one of them, that table right there is Spain 1938. We've got a table, and we've got a table for the Imperial Gardens as if we had invaded Japan. So there's some what if tables, and there's some historical ones as well. So pretty cool.
Very cool.
Won't play all of these here. We talked about this the other day, but so the 750 point was designed as kind of a get the cobwebs out, learn some V3, come play. So no artillery platoons and no vehicle platoons, and it was really fun, Mike. It was so fun. You had lots of infantry. In that environment, an armored personnel character's heinous. Right. Yeah. And the armies look great on the table. And then the GT was basically just let's play V3. Let's no comp, no dice caps. But I did apply the don't be a dick strategy. So if someone submitted this with 12 multi-launchers or 40 dice, I rejected it on a case-by-case basis and made them come back and play something that would be a little bit more reasonable. We do table service at they'll bring you a beer while you're there, which is pretty cool, while you're playing, or Coke, or whatever you want. And then everyone got a T-shirt, and they get a template, and they get a medal. I buy Soviet era medals, and I give them away. Everyone gets one because the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, so the medals aren't real. So I give these medals away, but they're and then I give medals away for foo bars and for other things that happen during the game. And then here's all the sponsors, and I don't know why that fonts, but Michael, you were very generous. You gave us a gift certificate. This is only, that table there is really, most of that was for the recon tournament. This table filled up again for the GT. So everyone got a prize. Many people got two. And
fantastic.
It was, and like you say, the community came out, and Michael, thank you for your support. Your gift certificate went to our youngest player. So hopefully he'll be able to buy some new toys. And then we buy lunch for everyone during the day. That's so you don't have to leave the hotel. And so that you don't have to worry about it. Like I played at venues where everyone leaves for lunch, but then they don't come back for an hour and a half, and now everything's running late, and maybe you got a plane to
Yeah.
catch or whatever. And so we just say, we're going to feed you a hot lunch. You come in, you grab your plate, you fill it up, you get back as much as you want, and then you can roll back into your game without feeling stressed.
Right.
And this is very, very important to us. So
And healthy too. I see that good selection of healthy objects. I know in many other, again, speaking to cons, usually you got the food booth right outside the convention center, and it's hamburgers, hot dogs, chips, and sodas. And those might be fine once in a while, but man, you really took good care of the folks, and that's awesome.
well, so I was at I think it was at Adepticon. I think it was at Adepticon, and I went out to you're in this huge concert thing. I mean, a huge convention center, and you go out to where the food booth is, and it was $32 for a burger and chips and a Coke. It was like, holy cow,
That's
it's so expensive. It's ridiculous. And I think it was like $28 at NashCon for something pretty much the same. And it's like, that's really terrible. It's taking advantage of people. So we try to feed people well. Food at hotels is always ridiculously expensive. And we're out there competing with weddings and corporate events for space. So, it's always a balance between how expensive is the ticket, and then we are sensitive to it. But we think doing the way we do it makes it a unique event, and people seem to come back over and over and over again. So that's a lot of fun.
The only thing I've seen similar, fella used to put on a board wargaming event here in Savannah called Savannah Skirmish, and it was 3 days of board wargaming. It was amazing we put it on at the country club off of Quaco Road. And it was the same thing. I think it was $60 for 3 days, but that also covered lunch, country club buffet lunch, or maybe you bought the lunch separate. But anyway, it kind of rolled it all together. And if you've never if you've never war gamed overlooking the golf course, it's a fantastic experience. So that's really cool, John.
That is actually really really cool. I can only imagine the combination of personalities when you add in wargamers and sports enthusiasts. That could be an interesting group. At Dragon Con one year, they had in one of the hotels, they had like a Baptist ministers convention going on at the same time as Dragon Con, and you got all these people walking around in Space Marine outfits and stormtroopers and demons and all this crazy stuff. You got all these very conservative evangelical ministers in the place. They all seem to get along and have a good time. So there you go.
Absolutely. You kidding? That's a ready-made mission field, man. Hey, wait a minute. We get to go to the people. How cool is that? Hey, so that's
Absolutely.
great.
So here's the Army breakout. We had a few more lists come in and a couple walk-ups. So we had 45% of the list was German.
Okay.
And then U.S. was the next largest at a third. The highest dice count was 25, and the lowest was 13. We had actually quite a few in that mid to high 20s. Which for 1250, 13 is a little low probably, and 25 may be too much in terms of time. One of the things I was really worried about was that even with 3 hours, you got a new edition, you got a bunch of new players, and you're playing 1,250 points.
Yeah.
And every time you add a new unit, it's not just one more unit, it's another decision you have to make.
Yep.
And those decisions stack, and it gets increasingly more complex. So I was really worried that we would have a bunch of the tournament finish not finish their games. If you look at this, in 2024, 54% of the people finished their game, and 67% of the people finished their games all the way through to turn 7. And 2025 is almost identical.
Okay.
I don't completely know why we're not getting to turn 6 at either 1,000 points or 1,250. It seems like people just kind of it may be because of the percentage of newer players, but for whatever it is, it wasn't significantly different from last year. And that if I had to do it again, Michael, I would probably go down to 1,100 points.
You go down what?
To 1,100.
1,100.
Yeah,
I think we stuck with the 1,250 for what we're doing, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. And of course, we're gonna have players, unless of course we have new players. Everybody will have another couple of months of experience maybe in playing. I know one of the things I always tell players, both new and old, is be thinking what you want to do with that die. Already have something in mind
Yeah.
that you want to do, so that when that die pulls, you're ready to just execute. And that really speeds up play. If you wait to make the decision till you pull the die, well, that's where some of your bog down comes in.
I didn't plot it completely, but when I look at it, there was not a direct relationship with the number of order dice versus the turns finished. Instead, the players that play slow played slow in V2 with 1,000 points, and they still play slow in V3 with 1,250. And if you know you
Got
play
it.
slow,
Okay.
if you know you play slow, you may need to do some practice on that in order to improve it, because you want to get through. You want to finish turn 5, and you ought to get through turn
Right.
6, especially in 3 hours.
Right. Yeah. And I know our buddy Randy, he got as many practice games in as he could, and so did I know Chris and one of the other guys from our
Yeah.
group who I think went to Warzone. They got a couple practice games in too, and just for that reason, to make sure they were, does the army list work? What am I seeing? What decision points am I going to have to make with it? So that's a good point. So just in general, of course, the best way to play better is to play more.
Yeah, but there are some tricks, and you might consider doing a show on it, because, like, you need a carry tray for your army. If you're trying to take your toys into and out of your foam trays, that's going to slow you
Right.
way down. You need a carry tray that you can bring with you.
Guilty.
It can just be a go to Walmart and buy a picture frame, and for $8, and then you've got one. And if you want to spray the glass green, and then you're good to go, right? Or just go back into the back of the hotel and ask them to borrow a one of those round server trays or something. But you need something to carry your army around. And then the second thing you need to do is you need to rather than trying to read someone's army list, if that type is small, just walk up to their army and say, "Would you explain your army to me?" That'll speed things up dramatically, because you're not trying to read through the list. So there's more tricks like that to speed up, and I think it'd be a fun show for maybe you and Randy to do it. How do you improve the speed of your game?
Okay.
I think slow players aren't aware that they're slow players either, and the trick there is just take a stopwatch and just time your turn, and you'll find out that it's taking you a lot longer to do things than you think. And then you got to look in the mirror and figure out, why is it? It didn't seem like it took me that long, but it does.
Right. Got it. Yeah.
Um,
Game time moves fast.
yeah, like if you move the front rank of your infantry, chances are you just keep everybody in coherency. You can move the front rank, and then you can move more sloppily with the back rank.
Yep.
There's a bunch of tactics like that that'll speed things up. Anyway, so if you look on the left-hand side there, the Axis and Allies were pretty close in terms of total battle points per game, average battle points per game.
I'm not seeing a screen, sir. Looks like it dropped off on us.
Thought I was showing screens, but I can do this again. That's weird.
Pardon the technical difficulties, folks. There we go. And there's your slides, and back on stage. There you go, sir.
Did you see this one?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, so the straight battle points, Axis and Allies weren't dramatically different. Last year, that was the opposite. Allies were way ahead of Germans. So V3 has helped Germany become much more, or the Axis become more competitive. And that's good to see. If you look up at the top, we had 37 FUBARs in the GT.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. Yeah.
It was FUBAR weekend, and I would say, I'll bet if you talk to the players that came into it expecting higher results, a lot of the really good players had some really bad luck, some really swingy games where,
Yeah.
the number of tanks I saw backing off of the board because of one pin and they fail a morale test, it was pretty brutal. So the dice gods were alive and well.
I was just thinking about that rule the other day because I love to run my armored cars. But oh my gosh, if I fail a morale check, pretty much that armored car is going off the table. And that
24
just,
inches.
man, that seems like a brutal penalty for simply failing a morale check. It's like, wow.
I guess they're recon and they don't want to get killed. So,
Right.
um, you know, as you think about it, there's 1,000 stats you can take a look at. It is, you know, one of the things I had hoped that V3 would do is nerf the overwhelming, you know, dominance of light tanks, and that just did
Yeah, no.
not happen. It's worse than ever.
Yeah.
Medium
But
tanks, we had a few. Go ahead, Michael.
I was gonna say, but like I was saying, I think in our preview, um, one of the things that makes bolt action playable for all the factions is, light tanks are competitive from 1939 to 1945, and that means the Poles and the French tanks are going to be competitive against late war light tanks from Germany and Russia. The big swing is, of course, in the bigger tanks, especially for Germany and Russia. Historically, it was the big tanks that really kind of changed the face of armored combat in the real world. But in the bolt action world, with light tanks, being a pretty good bang for your buck, you're gonna see them, and that means that your French Hotchkiss 35 and 39 is competitive against that Panzer II or that Dacca Stewart.
Yeah, so you know they halved the number of machine gun shots, but they increased your ability to hit at range, which means
Yep.
those light tanks are killing stuff from across the table, and they're mobile and they're armored, and that means that not everything on the table can hit them. So a lot of the tanks. I actually want to show you a German list. I mean, a Japanese list that played was on the top table. How do I get to it here?
I have noticed that in bolt action, the Japanese have access to. I guess Japan, at least as far as in its historical army list, really did have a fair number of average tanks. They just, given their manufacturing base again, historically they couldn't put a lot of them out. But our games are not bound by that. So the
Right.
Japanese really can get access to really some first class tanks.
Well, I mean, the Japanese versus China on the mainland that weren't armored forces, or moving into Singapore where the British were holed up in fortifications with no mobile assets, their light tanks absolutely dominated, and so it's cool. So here's a Japanese list. It's 20 order dice. You could have seen a 20 order dice list in V2 easily, but it's a
Yep.
very different list. And this is what was on the one of the top tables. And this list, this is Joey Biasco's list. He could have, if things had gone differently, he could have won the whole thing. But he's got so a regular platoon commander. But look at his infantry now. He's got Japanese veteran paratrooper squads with submachine guns. This is an assault list. This is a assault weapon list. Very interesting.
Right.
He's got some suicide anti-tanks. And then you come down in his second platoon. He's got a couple of bamboo spear, but these are really small units, 15 and 5. These are really kind of fill-in units. Some more suicide anti-tank guys, flesh out his order dice. And then you get into his armored platoon, and he's got a Hago tank with turret-mounted low velocity AT gun and a couple of machine guns, and then the Type 87 car with two machine guns, which is really good. I think he had 3 of those. There's another Hago. There's another armored car. There's another Hago.
Wow.
So it was really a light tank spam Japanese list.
Oh,
So if you kind of think that through,
right.
V3 comes out, and here's a player that kind of rethought through how to put a Japanese list on the table. So he's got veteran infantry with SMGs, and then he's got a bunch of light tanks moving up, just spitting out machine gun fire left and right, and he's got a bamboo spear, a large 15-man squad that can come up and assault whatever's left over, and it's really interesting. And he played really, really well, and I think if you'd seen this list in V2, you would have gone, huh? What is this Japanese player doing? Why aren't they going for Banzai? But with the new rules, this was a strong list.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Wow. And this is, again, is one of those things I noticed. And of course, stocking the Japanese armor, I've been looking at the stats on them. I'm like, Well, dadgum, the Japanese have access to just some solid tanks that are competitive. And
Those
wow, that's great. What do we got here?
So this
Italy.
is a list that you wouldn't expect. This was also on the top tables, and Joe easily could have won this. I think he was our best Axis player. He was maybe a point out from best general and just a couple points out from overall. So he easily could have won it as well. So let's look. This is an Italian list. So here's a platoon commander. Here's an infantry section, a couple regular sections with light machine guns. Nothing special there. There's one veteran unit. That's the Bersaglieri there with some infantry with a machine gun, but again, nothing scary. A tank rifle. Now here's his armored platoon. So that Simaventi 47 is a command tank with a couple of machine guns. There's the tankette with a couple of machine guns. There's the M1139, which is the one with 4 machine guns and a light AT gun. So that's 12 shots at range. And there's another one of those, and there's another one of those Simaventes. So he's got an armored platoon that's just spitting out machine gun fire at range. And then he brought an artillery platoon with a couple of automatic cannons and a light howitzer. And then finally he had a recce platoon with something kind of interesting. He also brought a parachute platoon, a parachutisti, I don't know how to pronounce it, with some assault rifles, submachine guns. He even brought a Panzerfaust. And and he put all that in an Auto Protetta, which is their armored transport. So here's a list. Here's an Italian list. It's got a little Fiat from the bottom for probably for an anti-tank rifle. But here's an Italian list that's different from what we would have seen before. On paper, it doesn't really look that scary, but this list combined with the Italian special rule. So on turn 1, you can't run because the Italians have got minefields and stuff out on the table theoretically. So if someone else brought an artillery list and you've got to move onto the table, you can't bring them on turn 1, which means you can't bring them on turn 2, which means you can't fire in turn 3. So G's using the Italian special rule in half the missions to give him a huge advantage. And then the other Italian special rule is that he, in games where he's set up on the table, he can set up an ambush. So those auto cannons, put all those tanks in ambush, and now nobody wants to move forward against a billion machine gun shots. So really, really interesting. Right? Very different lists than we might have seen before. I'll show you one more here. Let's look at this one. So this is Robert's list. This is a Marine Corps list. I've got a cool picture of it I can show you in a minute. He's got a company commander. I want to talk about that in a second. Here's a rifle platoon. It's I'm sorry. Here's just the lieutenant, but here's his Marine squads. So he's got 3 bars and 4 rifles. He's got that repeated several times. He's got a bazooka, a light mortar. There's a recce platoon here, and in a big heavy truck. And then he's got 2 of these M15 MGMCs. That's that thing with the double turret mounted heavy machine guns. And then it's got 1 of the automatic cannons, the heavy automatic.
Oh, that thing is just nasty.
Isn't it?
It really is. Yes.
It is. Okay,
yes.
so
he can. Yeah, it'll ruin your day.
So what's not in this list, though, is
a
a
Lee.
Stuart. Instead, he's got a Lee in here, and of course, the Lee can fire 2 different anti-tank guns, and then it's got a couple machine guns as well. So a very different approach here, and he did exceedingly well. Again, if you looked at this list on paper beforehand, you might have gone, "That's pretty interesting. I don't know how that Lee's going to do." But in the game now, where it's so much easier to hit at range, he's got firepower he can put downfield. He's got a couple of really decent, infantry squads, but a completely different model here. And he's using the company commander to effect to make sure that everything's moving in the direction that he wants to do and doesn't get bogged down. And I really like that the lists, and this one is another one. Robert was also on a top table. Some things would have had to gone his way, but he conceivably could have won certainly best allied, and he certainly could have won best overall. He had really good points for painting and for sportsmanship, so he was in the running too. So you look at it and go, isn't it cool that we now have a new edition where it's not just British Gurkhas and Stuarts,
right?
It's not the same list over and over again, that a lot of variation in lists can still be competitive, and I love that. I think that's a huge victory.
Yeah, that's a win. You know, yeah, to your point, there's no meta that, oh, if you have this army, you're going to be more favored to win. So
Yeah.
that's really great.
There's
Yeah, I heard
there,
even the American aircraft were just not as much of a threat as they used to be.
so we had a lot more forward artillery observers than we had air, but the air observers, they were either having a great day or they were having a horrible day. And it really
Right.
depended on whether your opponent brought AA or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of American players out there that imagined getting 4 airstrikes in a game and found that they were lucky to get one airplane that actually was able to come in. I think you'll see a lot of them rethinking the value of their air observers or playing them differently. If you're playing this list,
Yeah.
priority number 1, if you've got air observers, is to kill those 2 GMCs. You do
Yes.
that, and now you can you may have to bring your forward air observers in late game rather than early, because taking out the AA is going to be your priority. So it changes the whole kind of in your head mechanic, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Just wanted to show off some best painted armies. That's Brian McCallup's there. That's Sean Ledford's Soviet list over on the right. And our winner was Kyle Sherry. Had beautiful, all the eyes and the unit patches were done, and all the collar tabs and some beautiful work on his tanks. He did a really great job.
Wow.
You know, finally here, you know, I think there were almost every list was rocking at least one AT rifle and maybe usually multiples. Light sporter, there were a lot of light mortars, but as I was watching them on the tables, they weren't doing well because they were dying really easy. An inexperienced 2-man team is a kill point waiting to happen. And then the last thing to talk about is flamethrowers. So, you know, I think a lot of people said flamethrowers are dead. Oh my God, you know, I'm not bringing them. We didn't have many, but the list that was the overall winner, and that was Christian LaSala, and I can show you his list. The list that was the overall winner, he where is he? He's right there. He brought a barbecue list.
Oh, barbecue list.
Yes, he did. He's got an inexperienced commander, and he's got a cavalry squad, which is interesting, a vet cavalry squad, but a here grenadier squad, and then his second platoon's engineers. And what he did is he bought 2 Petamags, so 2 half tracks, and he had 2 Pioneer squads. So you got in each half track, you got a Pioneer squad, and then alongside them, you've got one of these flamethrower teams that carry these one-shot weapons. These Einwaffel Flammer. I don't know how to pronounce them, but it's a single-shot flamethrower weapon. So now and then he puts an officer in there, and so these half tracks would roll up. The officer would give an order to the half track to move, and he'd give advance orders to the 2 teams on board. And so the half track moves up 12 or 9, moves up 9. The guys jump out 6. They've got a 6-inch range on their flamethrowers. So that, what is that? That's almost halfway across the table, and then they're flamethrowing up 3 different targets simultaneously because a single shot weapon can be fired at multiple targets. And he was just roasting people alive. It was really you know, thing to see. And then he had some Nebbelwerfers. Michael, we had a lot of people who brought multiple rocket launchers. Brought 3.
Right.
Wouldn't let them bring more than 3, but a lot of them brought 3. His list is no different, and they were using those. As suppression weapons as well as offensive weapons. And what I mean by suppression, what I saw over and over again was whether or not the rocket launchers ever hit or killed anybody, they were forcing the other player to disrupt their plans. They couldn't afford to bunch up. They had to spread to the flanks in order to avoid the whole army getting concentrated in the middle, and they really had to use terrain to avoid being shot because the Nebbelwerfers in this edition, this was before the FAQ, they can't use spotters. So it was a lot of psychological effects, whether or not they were blowing a lot of people up.
Right, and now they can use spotters, so they're going to be even more trouble.
Yeah, the new rule. A lot of people were freaking out. I think they're better. Yeah, the minimum range is 36, but you stick them in the corner, and now you can use a spotter to find them. I think they're better.
Well, yeah, and I never understood why they couldn't use a spotter, because by definition, rocket artillery is indirect. But so I think that's fair. Of course, I haven't had to face that. I don't think, not yet. I'm sure I will at some point. Somebody will roll a Nebbelwerfer out and blow up half my army, and I'll have to go get a beer or something. It'll be all right.
Well, the new FAQ's got a lot of people stirred up, and so that's going to change the meta. And you got the new American book out, that's going to change the meta as well. But if I were going to do a conclusion on bolt action overall, it is that it doesn't force you into a mono build like the old version did. There's a lot more flexibility in what's good, and some of the things I'd hoped would happen was with the MG teams would get great. They really didn't. They were dying really easy. And that light tanks would get nerfed. They didn't really. But overall, the edition seems to play really smooth, which leads me to Q&A. So our TO questions during the game. So you'd think you've got almost 40 players playing bolt action. Many of them are brand new, and it's a new edition. You would think I would be being called every minute with a question.
Right.
I wasn't. I mean, a lot of times standing around watching games and taking pictures. And when I got called, the number one question, other than how does prep bombardment work, the number one question I was getting was line of sight. Do you think I can really see the sky? Which is not a rules question, right? It was they wanted an interpretation of line of sight. Overall, I was stunned how easily the players seem to be managing the new edition. It was really good.
Well, the new edition has a lot less modifiers on firing, and that helps. It's a lot less to keep up with, and that speeds play all by itself. I got to tell you, being Bad Dice Baker, having to do saving rules is not my friend. I'm just saying, but it has definitely allowed us to speed play up. The fact that you can engage further out is also going to speed play up, because you're going to force people to ground sooner, and you're going to start your firepower is going to start having an effect much sooner than it used to. And honestly, given the scale, probably about appropriately. So yeah, it's going to be cool. I did a demo game Sunday with a guy that had not played bolt action before, and he was a Flames of War player, but he picked it up pretty good. And he actually ended up winning, I think, 2-1 on kill points. And yeah, it was great. I just, I actually got to play 7 games this weekend myself, even with running my booth. How cool is that? So really cool. Got a little bit, got a little bit of everything in. So yeah, you're absolutely right that the new version does have the potential to play quicker. It's much more decisive in the effects. So looking forward to see what people do. I think we'll see some grousing from players as these army books drop, because they're going to gain things and lose things. We will probably it'll probably take 2 to 3 years for things to even begin to settle out, because as these army books drop, the armies are going to change out, and of course that leaves us as TOs to figure out, okay, army book or no army book. I know our consensus was probably going to stick with the core rulebook for right now, so everybody's on an even playing field, and the PDFs, of course. And I would challenge players, even if you don't play the armies that are in the free PDFs are out for, grab the PDFs, because I would bet that when the army books come out, they're probably going to be some flavor of what you see in the PDF. So it's a good opportunity for you to both know what you might face, and also to consider possibly adding another army or another force to your list. So I know I got a buddy of mine that's doing partisans, and he's really looking forward to having fun with that.
I think they're really good. A lot of us didn't have a lot of armored transports. The lists did well, because it's like another little mini tank. It's moving your guys up, and the ability to put the officer on board, and then the officer giving a snap to order so the transport can move, and then the guys can jump out and do whatever they're supposed to do. That's very, very powerful. So I would encourage players that are looking at how do you buff up your list to V3, give some consideration to snap to. How are you going to use snap to? How can you use it to subvert the order dice mechanic to your favor? That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then be looking at company commanders, because I think we didn't have nearly as many as I think, and the people that brought them probably will never leave home without one again because they're really good.
I've been on both sides of that equation. I've been where I didn't have them, and when I added one in my last 1,250 point game, it was a game. Literally, pardon the pun, it was a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, in a game where there's randomness built into the order cycle, the ability to end that and that randomness and make it take control of that is exceedingly powerful. And then, you know, the other thing too is the jump out of the half track and do whatever you're supposed to do. So that half track can deliver. It's like a Scud missile delivery system, right? It's gonna move that transport up, and something's gonna leap out and do something. It might be a Piat or an anti-tank rifle shooting at the side of a tank and getting you that side bonus. It might be a flamethrower unit like we just discussed. It may be like in that Italian list, a group of parachutists that jump out and they're veteran and they're stubborn. They got a bunch of submachine guns and they're just going to lay in at point blank range. Whatever it is that's going to be your alpha strike, the officer on board the transport gives you this delivery mechanism that we did not have in V2, a reliable one, and it's really good.
Good point. Also, the armored transport. I think when I built the 1250 list, most of my officers and weapons teams I went veteran, except for the artillery officer. I made him inexperienced, but I stuck him in a half track. So he's got good protection. He can still make that difference. But he was he was cheaper. And for your artillery, that makes an amount of sense. So I know Randy and I went over my list in one of our shows, and we made a couple tweaks to it. But yeah, the snap 2 is huge, and the ability to use armored transport is going to be huge. I'm still playing around. I'm probably going to add a couple of light guns to my German artillery park. My German army is probably still my main tournament army, just because I have the biggest. I have the most number. Somehow I've ended up with the most number of toys for that. I guess because the Americans really don't have any sexy armored cars like the Germans do. But they got that Greyhound, and it's okay. But it's not a Puma, and it's not a 6 rad or an 8 rad.
It's still pretty good though. It's really good.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. All right. So again, I want to thank you. I know that putting a tournament together is even just pulling an event together is not easy, and you pull together a first class event, and that's awesome. I think the few guys I've talked to already are saying they can't wait to go back. If you're watching this and if you've not made a Warzone event, you want to go. This is going to become probably the Southeast equivalent of something like Historicon. I mean, it's got that potential, and not just for bolt action, but as John was saying, there's so much other stuff going on there. BattleTech, Warhammer 40K. There's going to be something for everybody, and certainly if they pivot it and they make it more like a tournament types, a convention type setting, that'll be definitely interesting. So worth a look. I know Gator Games will continue to support y'all because you guys are doing great work up there. And there we go. You got anything for the folks before we wrap up?
I just say if anyone wants to run, if there's a missing game system, we don't have someone running Star Wars Legion, or if you want to do Flames of War, or if they got someone who's a TO organizer and they're looking to come, we give you the room, we give you the tables, we give you plywood on top of the table. We even have mats for a lot of the different systems. So anyone can reach out to me directly if you want to next year be a TO running alongside of it. The Age of Sigmar guys more than doubled their numbers this year, and they were brand new last year. So reach out.
Fantastic. That's I love that. And there's those games are definitely, and one page rules is getting some traction. So if you want to TO, I think there's going to be a one page rules tournament at the upcoming Recon. So if you want to run a one page rules tournament there, that would certainly be a fine venue to run that at. So there you go. Well, that's great, John. And thanks for the reminding us the offer. Looking out for the TOs like that is huge, because they put a lot of time and effort in. That's one, a couple less things they have to worry about is tabletops and room. That's always good. All right, y'all. This has been Gator's Garage, the home of all things historical gaming in and around the great city of Savannah, Georgia. As always, if you get an opportunity, we're going to have links to Warzone in the list below, as well as, since we mentioned it, a link to Recon, which is coming up very quickly, as well as details on the upcoming March tournament with the Savannah Garrison. If you got any questions, our email contact information is there. Always happy to hear from our fans. You make comments in the comment section below. Good, bad, indifferent. Ask questions. Well, if John doesn't see them, I'll pass them on. As always, like, share, subscribe, do the YouTube things, and we appreciate your support of our channel. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Michael.